Hello, everybody, and welcome to the seventh in our webinar series about HPC, high-performance computing, data centers, efficiency, and more. This time, we're going to talk about smart cities, and we've got an extremely smart person here joining us today, which is also super exciting for us. In particular, we're going to talk about how the new urban data centers will be and how they play a central role in shaping the new smart cities of the not so distant future. Let me give you a very brief introduction to myself. My name is Diarmuid Daltoon. For anyone who doesn't know me, I look after worldwide sales and marketing for Submer. I'm a veteran of the hosting and cloud industries. I've been next to or near data centers for a good portion of my life. As always, my contact details are there. You can reach out to me directly via email, phone, Twitter, whatever you want. This particular one here, it says it's being broadcast on YouTube Live. In this case, it is not. It's being recorded, and we will later put it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. But of course here, for any way of getting connected with us on any single channel here, and one very important point I was asked not to miss, is that this will also be made available as a podcast on SoundCloud, Podbean, Apple Podcast, and on Spotify later. We have reserved some time for Q&A at the end of this session. So together with Matteo Mezzanotte and with Jeff Hardy, our fantastic team that actually do all of the work behind of this, we're going to address as many of your questions as possible. You can please type your questions into the Q&A functionality, so not into the chat section, but into the Q&A functionality of Zoom. And we will address your question if we can, and if we can't, we'll definitely come to it afterwards. Now, this particular webinar is going to be a little bit more interactive than usual. So Susanna will be pausing, and Susanna, we now know we don't have any time lag. So there will be questions available immediately, and you can see those also, Susanna, on your screen via the Q&A function.
Sounds great.
So we will see also what people are interested in having answered. So without further ado, I would like to give a super, super warm welcome to Susanna Cass, our esteemed special guest for this session. Susanna is an Energy Fellow, a co-lecturer at Stanford University, Stanford Urban Sustainability Program, and she's a data center advisor to the United Nations Sustainable Development Program, working with hyperscalers to prepare for the UN Climate Action Summit that takes place on September 23rd in New York, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
She has held executive roles for over 30 years in the data center industry, including executive vice president, head of innovation, and sustainability strategy at BaseLayer.io, acquired by Iron Mountain for $1.6 billion in 2018. Susanna was also COO of International Operations at eBay Inc., COO at Trilliant Network, which is a General Electric company, General Manager at HP APAC Network, Operation and Head of Global Data Center Business Operations at Sun Microsystems, which was acquired by Oracle. Susanna, you've done so much. This is absolutely amazing. And Susanna, you graduated from Stanford Graduate School of Business in the GSP Executive Program. You hold an MBA from Pepperdine University and a BS in Computer Science and Business Administration Marketing from SDSU. You're living in the Bay Area in California with your family. And Susanna, is there anything apart from those fantastic entrepreneur awards that you've won that you'd like to add?
No, that sounds good. I just look forward to share with the audience what we have prepared today.
Superb. Thank you very much. Okay, Susanna, this is really over to you.
Thank you, Dee, for the kind introduction. Also want to thank Matteo and Jack for preparing today's webinar and the Submer team, so I appreciate that. Most importantly, I want to thank the audience for putting up with us and starting a little bit late, but I assure you I'm going to pick up on time, so I'm going to go fairly quickly into the topic of smart city for the next generation of new urban sustainable data center. Let's start with understanding what is the next generation of urban system and why do I think you should care. I'm showing you a simple visualization of some key data that I got from the 2018 UN World Urbanization Prospects Report. For those of you, it's actually interesting to seeing the detail. Please send me a LinkedIn invite, and I will glad to make that report available to you. On the left, we can see in 1950, 5 years after the end of the Second World War, the world has 2.5 billion people inhabiting it. And 30% of them, which is about 750 million, lived in the urban area. Now that's no small number. The entire population of Europe today is approximately 750 million. Now jump 100 years forward, which is about only 30 years from now, to 2050 on the right, you can see a dramatic change. A projected 9.8 billion people, almost 4 times as many people are living on this earth. That's why it's so important we need to take care of planet A. And a projected 68% of them is actually going to live in the urban area. That's 6.7 billion people, almost 9 times as many as it was in 1950. In fact, 6.7 billion is the population of the entire world population only just 11 years ago. We are definitely going through an astounding urban transformation trend. That's why we're here today, to talk about how can we preserve ourselves going forward in the future with quality of life of all, and how can we understand it, and how can we understand this whole phenomena in terms of the rapidly growing urban areas and the impact it has on all of us in terms of quality of life. Next slide. Today, the world urbanization rate is 55%, which means we already have 4.2 billion people living in the urban area. And you can see the maps on the left. Urban transformation has occurred effectively everywhere, though at varying rate. And again, I'm going to put a plug on that data on the report. So if any of you are interested in knowing specifically the region as you plan out your business, as you plan out your migration, feel free to send me the link in, and then I'm glad to share with you the report. As you can see, the Americas and Europe are already heavily urban, with Oceania almost majority urban today. As you may be able to guess from this graphic, much of the urbanization in the coming decade is expected to take place in Asia and Africa. In fact, the UN report estimates that India alone will have its urban population grow by 460 million by 2050. So let me assess the knowledge of my audience today. Does anyone know which is the largest city today by urban area? So you can type in your chat on the answer. Now, do me a favor, don't look up the answer on your smartphone. Just submit the answer to the live chat if you know the answer or want to take a guess. Anybody typed in? Okay, well, the answer for many of the megacity emerging, the Americas are the most urbanized regions in the world. And next slide. We're going to the next slide. Tokyo is actually the answer. It is measured by UN, followed by New Delhi, Shanghai, and the other cities. Today, half of the 20 largest metropolitan areas in the world are in Asia. They are called megacity. And according to the UN, the population is over 10 million people in each of these large cities. Next slide. We will have many more of these megacities emerging in the near future. According to the UN report, an expected 10 more megacities will emerge in the next decade alone. So if you start thinking about building urban city or think about edge computing, these data will be important to you. These facts and projections share with you a glimpse of the journey our entire civilization is taking place, is actually doing the urban way of life and the digital effects it has on the urban city. Next slide, please. And the UN World Urbanization Report was helpful to share with us the population growth and also the urban migration trend. These are the trends that I study very detailedly with my class and my students because it really affects the urban life. In addition to that, the Internet of Users growth is also a key trend that you need to pay attention to, as it has jumped to 46% just in this decade. The connected everything era and the digital transformation trend have profoundly changed and altered the landscape of the digital and the physical world. Now, send in a hi message to the live chat if you have more than 5 internet devices. Send in another message if you actually have more than 7. Okay, next slide. Mateo, if you go to the next slide would be great. The importance of the urban system need to focus on improving on the quality of life. Let me share with you one astounding factor. Only about 4 months away, the machine users and the data volume would have surpassed the human users. So when many of us are actually building data center today for the future, we actually don't target human users. We focus more on machine users, and you can actually see the reasons why. So nothing else you learn from me today. Remember, you need to pay less attention to just human users because it is essential but insufficient. You need to also focus on machine users. So let's walk through the contents of it. Next slide, please. Sustainable urbanization is crucial to the future of a society with a quality of life for the communities it serves and the citizens like us, because it is better job opportunity. It is higher quality of urban life. We all come to the urban city because of better education, supposedly better housing, although living in Silicon Valley, I'm not too sure about that, better healthcare. And what I learned at eBay as a COO for the international operation is it's a mutual win-win for our platform for both buyers and seller. In this case, I would think we need to design it as a win-win for both the cities and the citizens that it serves. Without benefiting the city, it would be very difficult to justify the growing investment and the resource commitment to handle this urban growth. But without benefiting the citizens in the community, urbanization won't be able to improve the quality of life for the society and the community it serves. In fact, in Silicon Valley, California, USA, where I reside today and where I live, I have seen and lived the urbanization caused by this digital transformation for some time now. Next slide, please. I assume everyone on the call have heard of Silicon Valley? I hope so.
We've been there, probably most of us, a couple of times at least.
Although this is actually an interesting trivia for those of you. So many of you would say that you have been to the Silicon Valley, correct?
It doesn't exist, yeah.
Okay, well, can I tell you that Silicon Valley actually doesn't exist? And how can you be a someplace that doesn't exist? Anybody want to take a guess on the answer? All right, well, I'll share that with you. Silicon Valley doesn't have a physical address. So technically speaking, you cannot actually attend because it doesn't have a physical address. However, Silicon Valley represents a digital city that all of us immediately grasp and understand what that is. So hence, it's actually kind of a funny little question about that you've been to Silicon Valley, but it doesn't really have an address. So how can you be there? Now, Silicon Valley highlights a lesson we can all learn. Embrace how technology is going to change the society and how it's going to change you. What we call technology today, effectively, the Internet of Things, are everywhere. As I mentioned to you, you live with a few already, and some of you even have more than 7 devices, maybe even a server room. Like Jack, I probably think you probably have that in your computer because you're such a wonderful video and content producer. We work with these devices, we entertain by them, we carry them in our hand, we place them in our kitchens, sometimes we even wear it on our body like our wrist, and we interact with them in the middle of the night when you have to get up to use the bathroom before you go back to sleep. And you know out there who I'm talking about. And some of you even pay attention to these devices more so than the humans in your life. And some of you even sit inside them and let them drive you around town. In Silicon Valley, we are completely obsessed with technology, and we love it. We think the transformation is really cool. But you take a look at the slide here, many of actually the locals say, I have enough of it. I'm actually moving out of Silicon Valley because of either the rising cost of housing, the traffic congestion we have, or the high cost of education has all altered the landscape and actually changed our lives. The orange grove have given way to concrete jungle inhibiting from abort. So all the new folks that actually coming in Silicon Valley, if you take a look at the slide, actually come from outside of the United States. Okay, they are from global migration and coming in. Same effect is actually happening in Southern California and in Austin. Next slide, please. Now I just walk you through the what, the why, and the when fairly quickly. Let's discuss the who. In my class at Stanford University, named Sustainable Urban Systems, We stated the assumptions of six stakeholders for this physical digitalization of urban life. They are transit, banking, healthcare, identity, government, and business. For many people, myself included, these are the crucial things I depend on every day. And these change, this digital transformation and connected everything era is an example of an interdisciplinary framework that these six stakeholders are working through, intertwining each other. I teach my lecture using use cases. So let's go to the next slide, which is a point of care, an edge application. The expected market size of the point of care application is 1.1 trillion by 2030, which is only about 10 years and 4 months away. Point of care enabled by 5G has a large impact on the quality of healthcare received by hundreds of millions of patients and will feel significant change in the way how healthcare is going to be delivered. Urban system point of care application is an example of a disruptive innovation. It is a substantial enabler of a new era of outcome-based health services, and it gives rise to personalized healthcare, which all of us should want and would like to have, because we have more control of our own health system. The greater ability to continuously gather patient-specific data and ability to process, analyze, and quickly return this information at location specific to the patient and the recommended course of action to the patient at the point of care location will give us all, if we become patients in emergency case, greater ability to be able to manage our health conditions on our own. Access to patient and location-specific information is now made possible because of the technology. Better monitoring means a greater ability to reward provider on a basis of outcome-based analysis, such as MRI. Better monitoring also shifts the locus of care to the patient location. So let's take a look at one example. If an oh my God moment happened in your life, and some of you are actually planning to go away, like Mateo, to the mountains or something like that to unplug, well, check it out a little bit about how many MRI technicians are going to be in the place that you are. So I highly encourage you to identify that. If you want to kind of take a guess of how many patient and MRI, the ratio for the urban city is a lot higher if you were to actually go to Nepal. So it is extremely important that continuous monitoring of huge volume and continuous data stream is made available when the oh my God moment happened to you or somebody else that you care about, that the location-specific edge computing for these urban systems enabling the process of these patient data nearer to the patient, allow for remote imaging and analysis by the MRI technician. So even though they're not physically in Nepal, for example, the place that you're gonna go visit and climb the mountains and whatnot, but the MRI technicians and your doctor can still diagnose you, can still work remote, can still use machine learning algorithmic diagnostic to prescribe care at your location. And this enabled an urban system to be working for you is what we call outcome-based model. This new policy is aimed to save life. At the same time, it is implemented to reduce the huge cost of medical bill. Next slide, please. The data center and the urban system design need innovation. Those who like to prepare your career going forward or start to develop commercial monetization strategy, like the job that I did when I was at eBay, is to figure out how we make money. You need to master at the nexus of the physical world and the digital world. The focus of unlocking the potential of what is possible in the infrastructure of the data center, the physical layer, and how digitization can transform the connected everything era is where disruptive innovation lives. That's where you want to monetize. That's where you want to focus on environmental and societal benefits. And I call that the triple bottom line. So thank you for giving me the time, the Submer team, to talk a little bit about the UN Sustainable Goal. The awareness and the knowledge is very low right now in the data center industry of the UN Sustainable Development Goal. I tempted to say less than 2% of the audience today even heard of it. So I'd really like you to embrace that. And again, send me a link in or go to the UN website and look up SDG and get yourself familiar with it. I really believe this is a phenomenal methodology that is very well thought out, that actually will help you in planning what is the next sustainable system that you're going to be designing, which is why I hope that's why you're here listening in. Next slide, please. Today, the velocity of trade and the volume is trending very quickly. You remember the slide that I mentioned earlier. It's a 7x per user and quadruple because of the machine user, which is why the machine user took over the human user from a consumption of the internet and the data volume that it all generated. Now, I'm a practitioner in this industry over 30 years now. I like to do what I say. So let's take a look here. 1 billion plus YouTube hours are consumed every day, though it didn't work for us today for our channel. So there's still room for improvement. 1.1 billion Gmail storage are created per day. 2 LinkedIn new users are registered per second at the moment right now. And 2 billion search query are also happening per second. So I've gone on 32 minutes now in the webinar, although I only talked about only about 20 minutes or so. You can actually do the math and already figure out how much of the traffic right now and the velocity is genuinely happening on just 4 of these channels, not to count all the content that will be served out. So I do have actually one slide that's actually pretty cool, that somebody actually did the work on whatever happened to an internet minute. It's actually pretty entertaining. So if you're interested in knowing that, send me another LinkedIn invite and I'll flip that over to you. I am very passionate after working 30 years in infrastructure innovation. I love doing data center design. I still do the data center build, and I still got invited to work on my team in managing all aspects of the data center global operation. The reason I keep going is because I genuinely inspired by the people in my journey. The commitment as a former COO for a couple of the operations and be able to launch the site around the world is unique. It requires relentless commitment from everyone on our team and dedication as a global team to bring our platform we build to sellers and buyers, to consumers, to users, to machine users, and the experience and the commitment we have is just astounding. And I still talk to my client today after 20 some odd years in serving clients like Goldman Sachs. And I just met them last week in New York. It is just amazing. For some of you who's actually on the phone who are ex-Sun, I just want to kind of give a plug. On September 27, the Sun 4 founders are actually hosting a reunion. So check it out, and maybe you want to come by and meet up with some of the folks, even though the company got sold to Oracle. Next slide, talking about the urban system, DC, and edge computing. The next data center are built, like I mentioned, not just for human user, but also for machine user. These are the examples of some of the machine users. They express themselves in form of electric vehicle, Internet of Industrial Devices, and the corresponding data volume that generated by each of the machine users is in petabytes oftentimes. The data center at the edge for urban system is about gathering the data, consuming the data at that physical location, and processing it. Correlating and enabling edge applications with cloud applications such as point of care is now made possible. Autonomous driving application is also being made possible and become more and more accurate. New applications enabled by 5G technology is abundant. And I'll be actually hosting one panel with how autonomous content delivery is going to be served at the DCV Dallas site in October sometime. All of these data are now gathered at the location, processed, and consumed locally at the location presence without needing the cloud. And let me give you one example. I found it unnecessary to store the edge information applications such as your GPS sequence in the cloud. It is simply just a waste of network, storage, and energy resources to store those GPS sequences. Unlike the cloud, all data is stored and often replicated in numerous locations. So there's actually quite a bit of waste because I just don't think many of the data, you're going to use it, but we worry about those moments that you're going to use it, so therefore we store it just in case you use it and become available, and oftentimes stored in multiple locations in multiple versions to make sure that we serve you that data point of the application just in case you may use it again in rapid speed. I see waste there. Next slide, please. On the design, it needs a rethink. The 4G LTE, which shows up a little bit on your phone sometimes, and there's a little bar called long-term evolution. That 4G wireless communication is essential for smartphone and the tablet, but it is simply insufficient for EV and the new Internet of Things devices. So it gives way to 5G, which stands for fifth generation, NR, which stands for new radio. So 5G NR is a new platform for the radio access technology. This new innovation specifically is designed for the fifth generation mobile network. This is a new standard for the air interface. It links with the legacy 4G over LTE, but it gives promise of millimeter wave with 10x performance over LTE. Next slide, please. In basic terms, why do you care about 5G? Well, remember three things. Number one, 5G delivers 100x increase of speed. It reduces latency 10x, and it increases capacity of new device support of 1000x. So this is an example of innovation. And it lives in the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, and it transforms the digital world of user experience. So it allows data to be correlated accurately, possible, to enable new applications such as virtual reality first response services for the point of care application. It can now provide real-time diagnosis to save a life at the accident site, even though your doctor and the MRI technicians are not physically there, and you don't have to go into the emergency room anymore because the emergency medical technician at your site is now made possible to give you the proper on-site analysis that was correlated by your doctor with your medical history and the radiologists and the MRI technicians that may not be available at the location out in the mountains somewhere that you might be, or the location that is outside the urban that may not have the MRI technicians on site. This promise life-saving and also save significant costs. That's why I use this application as a use case. Okay, next slide, please. Let's talk about how we design all these urban systems. They are fundamentally design principles. We'll walk through the pillars of innovation. Let me start with the word platform. It enables consumerization of new services. Application now can be written in the digital world, adhere to standards. User experience can actually be transformed. A platform is actually where developers write the application using common APIs, so applications can work together. Designing a platform is really key. As a platform such as the Apple iPhone, the owner needs to determine how the data interacts, how to give trust, how to perform governance and services for the community served, who gets permission, who does not, what synthesis to use to govern, and how do you resolve conflict to ensure it is a vibrant platform that everybody follow the rule and we have security control. A platform without control, without security guidance and governance is just a disaster. A community without user is just a piece of code sitting idle, not used to its full potential. And if they have no utility, it's probably not sustainable in the long run. Generativity is a made-up word of a combination of generalization and creativity. Mobility is here today. Just get used to it. It's immersion of mobility. It's the new normal. Sometimes it's actually changed the behavior of human. New applications, creation of new content, and use of artificial intelligence and machine learning need to weave in the data center for urban community. The reason is because that's where it enables connected community to future-proof against obsolescence, which is one of the success of eBay. Is the connected community, for example. The data center in the cloud and the edge applications with a connected community will be able to future-proof itself against obsolescence. Marsupial platform is actually one of my favorite. The platform actually evolves, interconnects with new users, other applications, and it ended up not intended for the original design. Machine users now can connect with other machine users to improve its own algorithm-based sensor. And performance data output can create something entirely new in its utility, different than the original design. All successful business should be marsupial because it listens and it learns itself and it's tuned to adapt. Autonomous transportation is a good example. It is not just a vehicle app to take you from destination 1 to destination 2. When done correctly, it transcends the experience of your journey and it actually delights you in the process. Next slide, please. My call to action is really simple for the audience today, for those of you maybe work in the data center industry or work in an urban system design role. Number 1, please ditch status quo. Each of you are born to be unique. Why do you want to spend your time in life to conform so you look like somebody else and do the same thing? You are born unique. Stay unique. You are beautiful the way you are. It may be safe to live a life with similarities every day, but it's definitely more fun just to be yourself. I encourage you all to do the unthinkable. My life journey has been a lot of fun because I did that. Know the future is here. Know also the age group of the users is much younger than those we have served in the past decade. And many of them are actually ageless because they are machine users. Be customer-centric. And I don't think I need to tell you too many examples of great companies that survive because they're customer-centric. And I also don't need to tell you many companies that are no longer here today, not because they were sold. They just literally gone bankrupt because they lose the community it served because they did not plan themselves to be customer-centric. So don't fall into that trap. Map your own journey from this moment forward. I encourage you to be a leader of your own in your own urban community. It is very simple. Be a child again. Be curious, be fearless. Use the passion as your own fuel to be customer-centric always in the design of everything that you do and take part in the next generation urban system and community. Make the city that you live in smart. Design something that is sustainable. And if you like a framework, I highly suggest that you study the UN Sustainable Development Goal. Many smart people work on it with a good methodology. And more importantly, we like to listen from you about how things should be changed. So do communicate with us. Foster collaboration. Embrace yourself with people who are different than you. Remember, you always travel faster by yourself, but you can always travel farther as a team. And it's more fun to actually have people on your team. So what's not to do? Do not think or do linear. That's what Susanna asked you. That's my request today. Please do not think or do anything linear. The UN SDG goal and the circular economy are really good framework. Align yourself with the circular economy with these proven disciplines. Focus on zero waste, clean energy, innovation infrastructure with design for disassembly. Next slide, please, Matteo. So join me to celebrate the success of urban system community and a shareable carbon-free generation. So out from all the goals that UN has with their 17, in one of the sessions that I did in UN City with the hyperscaler, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, they're all attending. We all collectively picked 7 goals that we thought is really important. Many of you probably have heard about all the clean energy pledge by each of the data center company to be 100%. Number 9 is my favorite because you definitely can work on innovation and infrastructure and help move the industry along. We talked quite a bit about sustainable cities and community. I hope I shared with you some of my notes today that has actually been helpful. And more importantly, all of us can take part in the community we serve. And for some of us who are actually in the data center business, we should be responsible for our consumption. And we are currently now working quite a bit now on baseload generation in our production. What that means is we produce our own energy that we actually consumed, and we harmonize with the grid without impacting the community served. So I hope today's session is helpful, and I welcome your feedback. And my name is Susanna Cass. Thank you.
Susanna, if I could start clapping, if that was appropriate, I would. However, I'm not going to do that right now. So I just wanted us to come back to this one thing. So first of all, everybody who's still tuned in to us, now is a great time for you to type in any of your questions into the Q&A section. Thanks to those who took actively part in the questions during the whole thing. I have been answering a couple of you in the meantime. But Susanna, let's go back to this urban data center and what it's really going to look like. So what is really, in essence, this new urban data center? Can you maybe try to sum it up for us just in one small sentence?
Yeah, the new urban data center will be location specific. So no longer will be this more behemoth big data center that is, hundreds of megawatt. So you start seeing many of these new urban city that are just in your neighborhood. It could be under a cell tower. It could actually be in a community that is served, that is very close to some of the community that we all kind of hang out, such as a mall or community colleges and campus-like environment, because it's focusing more on serving the community with a high emphasis on gathering data at the location specific, consumerizing and correlating with the edge, and maybe not even storing the data after it's being done. And so it'll be a lot more of the smaller one enabled by 5G and NR.
Okay, so if we're able to say the same thing, we're basically saying that the new urban data center is an edge data center. It is going to be where it's needed. Do you have any feeling, or has the UN done any work regarding how many urban data centers are required per 100,000 urban occupants, for instance?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No problem. So this is another question that came in. I'm just asking, how many urban data centers are required per 100,000 urban occupants? Do you have any kind of numbers for us to say, well, in a city, in a mega city like Tokyo, like you were sharing with us, they're going to need X number, or it's a certain number of urban data centers per million or per 100,000 occupants. Do you have any numbers on that?
Yeah, we haven't published the data. We're studying actually 55 smart city right now. And as you can imagine, most of them is actually in Asia. So I will probably know a little bit more in, I would say 30 days, Dee, when you and I actually going to be in Singapore for the 2 event that we talked about, right? So some of the data will be disclosed then. So I'll take it as, rather than guessing it, what I'd like to do is maybe pass that report over to you for any of the user might be interested in knowing. I have to emphasize on one thing. Again, this is not about just the number it's actually served, because there's 2 numbers. One is the population growth and the other one is the migration. All of us actually can be citizens of somebody today physically, but we are definitely as citizens of a community in the digital world. So the urban systems need to make sure that in addition to actually having a location proximity, we actually also serve the digital world of the community. That's why I play up a little bit about using Silicon Valley, that everybody feel like they know about it, they visit it, they connected with it, they understand what that is, but it actually doesn't have a physical address. Does that make sense? Yeah,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
The number is actually more relating to the digital connection that give the latency and the support that they need for the user experience. But of course, it has a physical presence because it needs to have a hop-on access point.
Yeah, I mean, it's also how long is a piece of string? It's always the normal question. So I have an excellent question here. We focus on energy efficiency of the digital systems, but what about the consumption of natural resources? For example, the work done by the SHIFT project and their recent report, Lean ICT, towards digital sobriety. Do you think we should look towards or look at changing behavior?
Absolutely, John. Thank you for asking the question. I frankly don't have time to go into the other aspects of it, which is energy smart and also the behavioral. Indeed, it must. Anytime they're actually talking about urban communities, migration of people, absolutely, it is extremely important to be able to understand the behavioral and the modification. Frankly, I make a little bit joke about how many devices you have, and you actually have experiences better with your devices than actually with human user. is a shift of the behavioral. And I listen a lot to my professors at Stanford and other schools, actually other great schools that genuinely study that behavior. So the answer is very important, and that need to build into the design. Just didn't have time today to talk about that aspects as well.
No problem. And Susanna, you and I spoke briefly before this live session here also about the urbanization and also the change we need to affect within public transport, lots of other things like that. A lot of these things are, of course, where we need to change behavior as well. So it all comes and all ties in together to what you're saying. Rather than just having a physical solution which is there, which is possibly good enough in some cities. Of course, they need to look towards those figures coming down the road. Okay, we have another question here. Do you foresee any slowdown or even end to the explosive growth in the future?
Well, Mukesh, I don't think so. I'm actually not seeing anything slowing down living in Silicon Valley. Although actually, I am actually seeing one trend that actually shared by my colleagues at Microsoft, and I want to thank him. So Brian Jennings is the general manager of Microsoft, and he leads the whole profound portfolio of Microsoft in that regard. One of the key things he actually talked about and used in the word slowdown, I thought that was very interesting that I'd like to share with the audience, but I do want to quote him because I learned that from him today, from him just last week in a call. So Brian basically said, hey, listen, you know, with all the different data center and all the internet of devices and EV and blah, 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 and all the other things we're computing, but we actually haven't seen a rising growth of the energy consumed by data center. So hence I would use the word slow down. So the total consumption of the data center energy, even though we're building many data center at a very rapid pace to support the internet volume that I shared with you earlier, one of the reasons is because we're all doing a phenomenal good job in terms of ICT and energy efficiency. So we are genuinely doing very good, and the goal of 12, 7, and 9, because every energy unit that we're actually using a lot more thoughtful. We are wasting less, and we are measuring ourselves with metrics like some of you familiar with in the data center would be the PUE, or some other metrics now using AI and deep learning in the data center operation. So in essence, if you think about it, any new appliances that you'll be installing at your household today is a lot more efficient than the one that you grew up with in your parents' house. So even though you're using more in a way, but you're actually becoming more efficient, and the quality of the energy is actually also improving from a carbon emission perspective. So the data center is slowing down in terms of the consumption energy, even though we're actually using explosive growth. I will continue to see the devices is just going crazy. Dee, you and I are actually going to experience it being in Singapore in a couple of weeks. And I think we will absolutely see the trend starting in Asia and then blending over to United States.
Absolutely. I presume these data centers, just from what we've all been saying, they're probably not going to be relying on fiber cabling and probably more on 5G. Is that also your opinion, Susanna?
It's a combination of both. They're actually different. They work on a different layer, right? So some of you who are actually long enough for the industry, we know the OSI layer. So definitely fiber will be there. If nothing else, actually, Dee, I would highlight the fact that one of the events that you're actually going to will be focusing a lot about the undersea submarine cable. So the good old days for the submarine cable is like 2 cable strands, and now it's actually 6 to 8 and intertwined with each of them, right? Mm-hmm. So some of the hyperscaler are taking an effort. Most I would say Google and Facebook are way ahead of the game in terms of owning a lot of the physical infrastructure. But the good news about we're seeing them sharing those channels. So you're going to see a lot more in terms of the growth for the subsea cable and the cable landing station connected to a lot of the data center. I personally actually involved in 4 projects right now that the data center is not so much as an old warehouse or an old paper mill farm that got converted. It's actually connected to a cable landing station in strategic location because it's connected to the undersea submarine cable. That you can actually connect to the world. So I'm seeing that. Then on the other hand, above the ground, right? So you will definitely see, I talked about the 4G LTE and the new radio network enabled by 5G. And by the time your kids grow up, you know, we're gonna learn a lot more from them. There'll be 7G, 8G, and 10G. One of my favorite events is actually the Consumer Electronics Show, happen every year in Las Vegas, right after in January. It's a crazy show, and I heard that Elon, new company, is actually gonna shoot people in a tube, so we can travel from one convention center to another another location by basically get shot in a tube, you know. And I guess there'll be a long line for that because people have some fascination about getting shot out from a cannonball, you know. And we're doing that. It looks like a little bit of a hamster that shoot from one place to another. They're experimenting in CES. And I think in that show is going to prevail not just 5G and what's beyond 5G from a connectivity perspective. I guess the next version of it, I would not be surprised to see a lot more light wave connectivity, because we all know light speed is the fastest, right?
Yeah, I still want to be teleported.
Should be fun. I'll be first in line for that. Yep.
I'll be second. I'll see how it goes with you, and then I'll do it.
Yeah, we can hold hands and do it together, Dee.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to take just two last questions here, seeing as we did start late. One of them was really the assumption that new data center facilities need to be built, or that we're going to be reusing existing buildings. I believe personally reuse of existing buildings is definitely possible, made also possible by Submer's technology, but also I think it really fits in with the urban environment, and it's also the circular economy. That's something that I like about it. But do you think that the planning authorities in, especially I suppose in European cities, are going to allow new builds for urban data centers?
Yeah, the word actually new is very interesting because I've seen a lot of innovation in policy. So for example, let me be a little bit specific, you know. New doesn't mean completely greenfield anymore, or greenfield doesn't mean completely new anymore. I guess it depends how you want to interchange the word. So many policymakers currently now are giving different roles in terms of economic development, of re-innovation, of existing investment, of existing infrastructure. I am actually pro-growth, so I'll just declare myself, okay? So I'm definitely pro-growth with, you know, within reason of the community is served. The key thing about it is actually the definition of new or old or existing or legacy infrastructure is actually defined by a lot of city officials and policy now. So in my opinion, when you are a designer for the urban city, learn about the instruments and learn about what your community like and don't like, and be extremely careful in the choice of words when you put it out there on what your design is really going to be. In my opinion, all the US airport need a rehaul. You know when you come back in the US after you travel outside the world, because your line just dropped. And you never have that quality of service problem when you are actually in China, for example, or in Asia. You don't never have to find a Wi-Fi hotspot because you're there and the digital world just connect with you. So I would say there's definitely new terms for infrastructure innovation, which is actually one of the goals in the UN. We actually are trying to work with the UN, leverage them because they are very successful in the Smart Nation and the Smart City initiative to help influence the public and the policy official. So they need to kind of, in a way, get a kick in the butt and get with the program. And the last plug that I basically have is the following. You cannot have any other people in the world, be it a designer, design the community, the technology, or energy smart, or some gentleman that asked a question earlier about the behavior, with having the same men running the show. That's gotta change, okay? I'm a big fan on gender equality. If you want to do something a little bit different, put a woman in your team and hire a millennial. Immediately and every day in your session, you're going to hear things differently because they are so obvious to the folks that have diversity. So having diversity have proven that is going to help you to think things differently. And we do need to kind of have that from a policy perspective. So imagine actually the city official in the community you serve is going to be having the voice of the millennial. I actually think that's going to be winning. And those are some of the smart city that we are actually running the experiment, and genuinely actually let your kids take charge. I know it might be a scary thought, but it's going to be okay. If you're a parent, you're going to have to deal with it anyway, because you know how that goes. Your kids actually run the household. If it wasn't them, I personally admit that it would take me much longer, and I'm kind of an average IQ gal. It would take me much longer for me to get into the program on actually recycling. And I have to thank my two daughters, Bronte and Ellie, for actually getting me to be completely immersed in that behavioral modification. Nothing to do with intellectually, I don't get the benefits of recycling. So I like to really encourage everybody to focus a little bit more also on gender equality in your team.
Yeah, and this is where we also have to work on the psychology of changing those behaviors, which I think is very important as well, which is frequently ignored. Okay, we have just two more questions, but I think we're kind of time-wise coming very much to the end. Susanna, if you can really, really quickly, could the price for 5G, for the construction of 5G networks and the quantity of stations per square mile be a factor to decrease speed of growing all services that will be based on high-speed data transportation?
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, I think the gentleman here asking the question is more related to total cost of ownership. The answer is absolutely yes. With volume comes, of course, the price become lower. With rapid adoption and broad adoption with the community, absolutely actually going to drive the volume in terms of going up and hence the cost going down. We're absolutely seeing that, and many of the devices and currently now are actually embedded to be a 5G enabled devices. So that actually will be very helpful. Obviously, it's a red sea right now for everybody competing for the 5G enabled chips. But I absolutely see the trend is going to go down, just like energy storage. The price has continued to drop, or even renewable energy, the price continue to drop because the volume is there. Okay,
fantastic. Susanna, like absolutely, we're going to just continue on here, just letting people know where they can meet us, meet me, meet you. So as we said, Susanna and I are going to be attending the DCD in Singapore, which is actually not on this list, which is the 17th and 18th of September. So meet us there. Also, Susanna and I will also be in London the 5th and 6th of November. Susanna, you're there with the UN as far as I understand.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, and I'm putting the panel together, so I'll be open to anybody that want to kind of give the input. But the goal basically is to bring the UN and my colleagues physically present so people can interact with them. And I also got a couple email, LinkedIn messaging already. So yes, please, I'm glad to share the report that I share. So fantastic. Feel free to send me the link. Yep.
Submer is also going to be at GITEX in Dubai from the 6th to 10th of October. It is a massive, massive show. We'll be in Hall 8, just so you have a chance of finding us. And of course, the year is culminating, and I know that Susanna will also be there too, probably a lot of you, at Supercomputing 2019, which this time is taking place in Denver, Colorado. And that will definitely be the who's who of the HPC and supercomputing world, where we will be showcasing quite a lot of our things. Again, please subscribe to everything here. We will make this available in a slightly edited format on the various podcast channels. Also, we will publish this to our YouTube channel, so it should be up there tomorrow. And really what remains to say is to say to Susanna, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And we are honored to have had you on today as our guest. And I hope we will continue to have the reason to hear from you. We're looking forward to hearing that report. And we will publish and share that, I think, also, or at least details from it, probably in a blog post when that becomes available in 30 days. The report that you were talking about. And of course, thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thanks to Matteo and thanks to Jeff.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye now.